how did Gen.G become the new Pacific champions? Some say it's Texture going back to the duelist role. Some say it's Munchkin, proving he was right as an IGL. Or maybe it was KARON, the new godlike aimer. And while all that helped, I'll go ahead and say that the more I think about it, it was actually thanks to the one true Gen.G player all along, Meteor. Before we talk about Meteor though, we do have to mention Texture's insane performance at kickoff. I mean, just look at the stats. This guy played 429 rounds. 429 rounds. Gen.G played 20 maps, nearly the maximum number of maps you could have played to possibly win VCT Pacific Kickoff. And throughout all of that, Texture averages a 250 ACS. He's averaging 164 ADR, meaning that over 429 rounds, he is simply doing more than enough damage to take down at least one person per all of those rounds, right? Over the entire course of this, he has a first kill, first death ratio of 70-62, +8, despite having so many rounds. Once again, I mean, the max kills he recorded was 33 throughout this entire tournament. This guy was playing the tournament of his life. And I mean, we had back-to-back 4Ks, and let's just talk about the multi-kills. So Texture plays 20 maps throughout this entire tournament. He has 429 rounds, and out of those 429 rounds, he had 105 multi-kills. So basically a quarter of the time, this guy is getting 2 or more kills. And out of those multi-kills, 10 of them were 4Ks, 23 triple kills, and even 1 ace to boot. Meanwhile, we should note Meteor also doing his fair part of 90 multi-kill rounds, 7 of those being 4Ks and 20 of them being triple kills. But this is just insane. I mean, for a quarter of the time, if Texture is getting more than 1 kill and Meteor just about an even number as well, you're already starting off on a huge advantage compared to your competitors. And quite frankly, probably like 3 of those 4Ks should be aces, because he had a lot of times where he was so close to getting the ace and either was robbed or he got taken out in the last second. But anyway, it's a crazy stat line if you really think about it. Of course, on top of that, Texture always has been quite well known for his operator play as well, and I do believe he topped the entire tournament with the most operator kills, although, you know, most is a kind of a subjective stat line here since he also played the most rounds. But what I'm trying to say is Texture being an amazing fragger and a great duelist is a core part of how Gen.G plays a lot of their games, as we're about to find out, because it's a lot of setting up for Texture. To understand Gen.G's success, we have to look at their basic setups. Now, when the roster was first announced, we all knew this team was stacked of a lot of those Korean aimers. But the question was, how does it come all together? Where's the teamwork, the strats, maybe even the util? Well, Gen.G went ahead and seemed to say, well, if we're all great aimers, let's aim. And that's exactly what they did. Gen.G's attacks and defenses mostly rely on defaults and setups that focus on trading. For the attack, this usually consists of a 1-4 split or a 4-1 split, and usually rotating back and forth between those two. While for defense, it focused on getting info early for fast rotates, setting up for flood retakes. Let's take a look at a few rounds. So interestingly enough, one of the best ways to find out how Gen.G likes to play Valorant is actually the very first round they ever played at VCT Pacific Kickoff 2024. This was against RQ in their opening match of Group C, and it was the first map and the first round on Icebox, which was RQ's pick. Now, right away on the minimap, you can tell that there is a 4-1 split, Meteor usually being the one, of course, also usually playing that Sentinel role. And as we take a look at this round, as it progresses, what you're going to see is this slow creep movement from both sides. So Meteor in the beginning, just trying to make sure he's contesting for anyone pushing out forward, make sure he's getting info, make sure his turret stays online. And during all of this, using things like the Dizzy and the 0 point, the main forces of Gen.G will slowly approach all the way up to yellow. And they're actually going to walk all the way up to yellow to make sure that they have a crossfire setup. Now, we still have a full minute and 15 seconds left. So RQ continues to kind of, refresh their toxins and things like that. And then right away, Gen.G just says, okay, well, we've kind of denied them info using our own toxic screen. We've planted KARON here on yellow as that secondary lurk, and now they're going to rotate back. The turret never activated, so they know that they should be relatively safe. As you can see on your screens, they're still all keeping an eye on mid and kind of getting ready for trades, but nonetheless, they'll be moving on forward. Now, of course, they will tag Gen.G. He's going to get away with his life. Gets a little bit tagged, but not the biggest of deals. And during all of this, KARON on the minimap starts to press forward and actually takes out xFaroe. Funnily enough, xFaroe kind of suspected this, so he's the one also pushing forward at the same time. KARON slow creeping up, and then he's able to get the kill onto xFaroe, which means the B site has now been opened up. So this time, what they're going to do is, without the dash anywhere, they're actually going to leave Texture as the lurk and bring Meteor back with the nanoswarms for the potential post plant. They set the nanoswarm up alongside the spike, they get the plant, and then it's Texture who's going to be on the lurk, making sure he brings up the rotates. Overall, this is the basic foundation of how Gen.G wants to play. And obviously it's not a new default, but you know, people have different ways they like to play their default. Sometimes it's just kind of the very standard 2-1-2 setup, one person watching mid, just kind of scout out if there's any util, make sure you're keeping tabs and all that, etc. But Gen.G is much more about, okay, let's push and pull, let's push this side with 4, make sure that we have a good strong force that's usually going to outnumber the opponents, make sure we set up for trades, and then when the timing comes, let's try to push in, go on the lurk, go for the flank, things like that with the singular player, and if need be, we can rotate back and forth, so we can keep shifting our weight back and forth. Now, if you're curious on how Gen.G utilizes that default, I mean, there's tons of rounds where they're using some variation of a 1-4 setup, right? Whether it's on opposite sides of the map, maybe it's on a pinch, right? So something like Ascent, it'll be from top mid up until A short, and then the main force is going to A main, things like that. There's a lot of different variations you can use, but again, it's the confidence you have in the solo player, usually being Meteor, who's playing the Sentinel, and then the main force also being confident that they'll always be able to trade so that they're staying on top in terms of numbers. But at the end of the day, what that all leads to is the fact that Gen.G isn't always playing for some elaborate like set executes. What they're really looking to do is just flood the site. They're just looking to get in. They're looking to get in and create trades. So let's actually take a look here where it is a bit of a set play, but it's not the craziest thing. It's not the most elaborate thing. And actually, if you look at their movement in this round, you can tell that Gen.G is solely focused on making sure that they have the right positions to trade for each other. So during this round, what we saw is Munchkin actually puts a little bit of pressure in showers, destroys the spy cam, so that draws flashback to return to A site. He was on his way to B, and then he has to come back to A. And what we're looking at right now on our screens is because of all that, Buzz decides he's going to use his dimensional drift, and he actually goes all the way through B main and basically sees literally everyone but Meteor on the side of Gen.G. He's eventually going to exit here and he's going to gate crash back to safety. But what Munchkin is doing here is he has returned to support his teammates. Now, during all of this, we see the Trailblazer and it's coming out and it's initially helping clear out right under Hookah. So Meteor puts up his own cyber cage just so he can help get into the site at the same time as the rest of his teammates. Now, if you look at the UI, Stacks has just used this mosh pit. So the mosh pit, we're going to catch a glimpse of it here in the PIP that comes up in just a second. Actually, I think my camera's covering that, so you won't see it. But basically, the mosh pit's covering the entrance to B main. And look at the commitment that Gen.G has to entering the site and filling it. Another cyber cage to allow Meteor to safely get in. Now, note on the minimap, something that Texture likes to do on bind is he likes to get onto the high ground immediately at the front of the site. We saw it being done on A site. We're seeing it being done on B site. That way he can kind of be the eyes, right? He can be that spy cam with a gun for his team. And with this mosh pit, that it's in the PIP right around my camera, you see KARON is actually also just going to kind of stomp through and get into the site. You see he takes a little bit of chip damage on that dot that happens in the initial part of the mosh pit. And now they already have 3 people in the site. Seekers also being used by Lakia to make sure that they know where their targets are. And we're going to see flashes come out from both sides and the dizzies come out and everybody's kind of flashed up. And during all of this, Texture has now grouped up with Meteor, both on top of Tube. Stacks makes some incredible shots, but at the end of the day, I mean, this site is suddenly just Gen.G's out of nowhere, right? Let's just take a look at this round again. So what we're going to see happen is right on this part. Okay, so first of all, we did also note that the Thrash just gets KARON, so he's been detained. And if you look, Texture, this is a screen now. It's not Mako, although Mako's camera is showing. And if you look at the minimap as we're being slightly flashed, is that he's trying to wrap back around. He's trying to follow the Seekers and get these kills. Now, eventually, he's not going to get it right away. The Seekers are going to continue on through, but he doesn't want to push in just because he thinks that they have a chance for a flash or anything like that. He doesn't want to push in and try to greed for the kill and then not create a trade. He backs out and says, I'm going to go with Meteor. Now, everyone gets dizzied, so they just wait, and by that time, KARON is back with his gun. Well, again, Stacks makes some incredible shots, but it's just people constantly covering Crossfire so that as DRX comes in, they're going to have to fight more than one person. Then the pit goes up. Gets a little scary, but at the end of the day, Gen.G wins the round. And a lot of their attacks are like this. It's about, sure, you had the lineup. So if we rewind just a bit, what you're going to notice is that the snake bites land on top of the tube, and, you know, that's all great. And you had things... Sorry, Lockie, I'm kind of paused right as you're getting shot. But... you know, the Seekers go out, but again, it's not like they're using every piece of util to make sure that the site is empty. They're not trying to make the site empty. They're trying to go in and pick a fight and make sure they come out on top, right? This execute starts at 20, 24, 25. And, you know, all these utils being used, the smokes are used to delay a little bit, and within 10 seconds... within 10 seconds, and that's with an enemy Thrash and Mosh delaying them a bit. So in another world, this would have been like 6 seconds. Within 10 seconds, all 5 members are in the site. And this is Gen.G's philosophy, is that we're going to go in and we're going to trade. We're going to win out eventually on these fights, right? We might get traded a little bit, but we'll always trade back. Here's another cool example of Gen.G's philosophy coming into light. And this shows that they're able to adapt as well. I think that's the other important part, right? It's not just about, okay, well, if we've already committed to a site, we have to push in. Because here, it's a pistol round in the second half, Gen.G on attack. And we're going to see Meteor holding solo, watching out for a B push out. His turret is watching for a push out of C mound. Main force of 4 are going to be going in towards the toxic screen, towards a site. Given the positions of Meteor and his turret, most likely, unless things go awry, they're pretty committed to going to the A site. Now, as we see the countdown go through, what you're eventually going to notice is, okay, the guiding light comes out. You see the smoke just to try to buy time at Rubble from Paper Rex because they have 4 people pushing out of Mound. The turret already spots them, and Meteor catches sight of it. He turns around, checks, and he realizes, okay, this is a lot of people. You see pings trying to clear out Rubble, and Gen.G is like, all right, boys, like the map has suddenly gotten way smaller. We have to figure out what we're going to do. Now, as they don't see anyone right around the corners, they haven't been able to make progress in, and Meteor calls that the enemies have already arrived. And immediately, the entirety of Gen.G turns back around. Munchkin already has 2. And during all of this, Texture actually pushes up to make sure that he gets anyone who might be pinching in from A site. It's an incredible call from this team to just decide, you know what, this is going to be a Rubble fight. It's going to be a little different because we're on attack, but we're actually going to hold Rubble, and we're going to turn around and fight because that's where we're confident. We know that we can have the trades, and that's our strength. We need to live up to that. Here's another example of a 4-1 setup. This one's going to be a little different, but the philosophy still remains the same. So this time you have 4 people, although split 2 and 2, going for an execute onto B. You've got Munchkin on the lurk, watching for any pushes out of A site. Now this is the bonus for Gen.G. Let's keep note of that as well. So Trailblazer to help clear out Garden, and Meteor is going to be able to walk right into that. He actually spams the tube there. Catches sight of him right at the end, I think, and he actually just gets the kill right through. Unfortunate for Devi, he kind of, you know, is stuck at the entrance there, and he dies, and that lets Gen.G know, okay, we've got the numbers advantage now, right? No matter what, we're going to have the numbers advantage. So immediately, once again, Meteor uses his own cyber cage to get into the site. Now, a big part of this is because you've got this smoke, right here on Hookah that's covering the entrance for Texture to try to fly in. And Gen.G doesn't want to send Texture in on an island just to get shot out of the air and not be able to get traded. So what Meteor is going to do is he's going to creep in through his own cyber cage while his teammates are sending their utility to the back of site, right? The paint shells and things like the molly, to make sure that no one can peek out so freely from the back of tube. Meteor's already made it past the spray. He's made it into the little cubby at the entrance, and now he is the scout for his team. He's holding the angle, he notes ones in tube, and then Texture, look at the minimap. Look at the flight path that Texture takes. Instead of going backside to potentially get traded because they didn't quite have this cubby cleared, they don't, they threw utility, but they don't know exactly how many people might be at the back of site. You don't know who's going to come out on a timing from the smoke. So he actually flight paths so that he can make sure that he's right alongside Meteor and they can have a double team going. You still got KARON to watch from Hookah, and then you still got Munchkin to back him up as well. So you're still keeping somewhat a buddy system always going on. Cyber Cage to make sure that they can regroup, make sure they're charging in as a entire team, flood the site a little bit. Now Munchkin does get caught off guard from behind, but KARON will correctly flood the site with his teammates. And he'll even get one on his way out. He'll get something. And Monyet actually almost gets the kill onto Meteor. But the point is the idea of flooding is so clear from Gen.G. It's not about execute, go, kill. Like, you don't need to get the entry frag to enter. The idea is, well, let's all get in and make sure that we have the advantageous angles. Here's another setup. 4-1 once again. Meteor just looking to pressure onto Showers. And meanwhile, we're going to have, the tripwires to make sure they're covering their bases for any of the flanks. And it's going to be the main force coming in through a short. Now, they're going to do what they usually like to do if they're coming in slowly through the toxic screen, is Texture is going to jump up with a blast tag on top here. So he can kind of be that sentry. He can be the turret. He can be the spy cam with a gun for his teammates. And then they're all going to be able to fill the site. Lamps has been cleared with the Trailblazers, so they're safe from that angle. Now you have Texture on top of the smokes. He's on top of the truck. He gets the kill onto Mindfreak from a high angle, and during all of that, they have all crowded around backside as well, making sure they can trade for each other. They don't even lose anyone on this entire play. I mean, again, the fact is that you're not going for some flashy, crazy, deep double blast packs, right, with some deep utility, and expect your entry to just get all the kills and do that. I mean, if you have great flashes, etc., that's cool. If you have utility to make sure you're covering every single angle that the enemy could be holding, that's cool. But Gen.G just says, keep it simple, right? Let's make sure we can trade for each other. If Texture jumps on that box and he gets traded, we're filling in from the toxic screens so that we can trade right back. We've got Meteor coming in from Shower to make sure that he's targeting whoever's might be on triple as well. If one dies, someone else is there to pick up the slack. That's the attack of Gen.G. That's the general gist of it. It's always the idea of, 4 people getting ready to enter into a site, or sometimes 5, obviously, and make sure that you're going in as an entire group. Make sure you're set up to go in as a group rather than just sending in your entry on an island. That way you can fill the site, you have the better numbers, and you're going to come out on top, and the site is yours. Let's take a look at how that works out on defense. So let's return to the beginning of the tournament once again. This is against RQ, going back to that very first map that they played, the second pistol round. You see that it's a 1-3-1 setup on the minimap. Now on defense, generally the idea is Gen.G, they're going to try to fish for some early information. They're going to try to push out a little bit, depending on the map. If they can on one side, get some information, plant someone, then rotate everyone back to the other side so that you're ready for a fast retake or a flood retake right as the spike goes down. So on the pistol round, what we're going to see is, as we skip forward, you see a little bit of a push down tube. They check out mid. A is just being held by Meteor, just with a sheriff and a turret. And you say, okay, nothing mid. We hear some util on B. Let's all get ready to defend B site. Just a little bit of spam here and there. Of course, the toxic screen, they're not going to want to fight against that. Not enough util to lock it. Now, the wingman is going to clear that close angle right here on the minimap. So they know that they're able to try to push forward. So the dash, and then look at this. I mean, this is... They use this a lot, and this is why their comp is so good. We're going to see the Dizzy and a far flash drive to make sure they can clear yellow. So either way, you're getting, like, you just cannot dodge this, because either you're turning away from the pop flash and you're getting dizzied, or you're shooting the Dizzy and you're getting pop flashed. The timing is impeccable. The Dizzy starts to come out on top of yellow, and as you're looking up to, and because you hear that, Gem can actually tries to shoot the flash drive, and he just gets flashed. And then it's going to be Texture peeking out, right? He's just going to eat the half flash. He's going to peek out. Eventually Flips actually trades him back, but it's a really good way to take over space. And at that point, everyone enters in through the toxic screens, and they're able to start to push forward and really pressure. They take over yellow, so they have the crossfire. And even towards the end, because they have enough time, it's not like they're saying, okay, we have more members and we're going to have someone stick the plant. They just say, listen, it's the pistol round. It's not like they have an endless post-plant util. Let's just push out. Let's make sure we're constantly on top of numbers. Where it's a 3v2. Let's bait them out. Don't stick the defuse. All right, Xfero's still alive. Let's go in as a 2v1. Go for the trade. And then Meteor will get the defuse. The next round is going to be a selection from the split map that Gen.G and Argue played in their very first opening match. Now, at the end of the day, Gen.G's split does not end up looking very great throughout this entire tournament. But you can kind of see the same ideas, the same philosophy, the same habits are there for Gen.G. So they're on defense. Now, earlier in the round, there was a little bit of a contact in mid. RQ had 3 members there trying to contest for a little bit of mid control. Eventually, it's not going to happen. They had to get some heals back onto Jemkin. You can see that he's down to 0 armor. And with that, Gen.G says, okay, we're just going to leave it up to the Smoke and Munchkin to watch for that as well. And we will kind of start to shift our weight towards each site. So we have Lakia, who was originally helping on vents. He's going to come to A Heaven. And then meanwhile, you've got Texture going out to B. Now, Meteor watching with a Marshall here. And look at what Lakia does. Okay, the Cyber Cage goes across. Meteor not going to go for a timing shot. And Lakia just immediately drops down. The timing shot and the kill isn't what I'm impressed about. What I'm impressed about is the fact that you have Munchkin watching mid. So you have this faith that if it's going to be a mid to vent push, you will know. Or if it's a Heaven to vent, you will know. But if Lakia stays on top of Heaven and you don't know how many people crossed, Lakia can't really defend himself, right? Like if you take out your guiding light, they might turn the corner and get you before the flash goes off or the Trailblazer. You're just not in a good position to defend A Heaven on your own. So you just say, let's ditch that. We've got a toxic screen here as well if need be. So he's going to come in and fill the site with Meteor so that they can always fight as a team. You're not looking to go for 1v1s. He actually ends up getting a timing kill as well, which helps a lot. So now he uses a Trailblazer because you've got Meteor, who's going to be watching with the Marshall. And now, after that tag, you see that they crossed over towards A Heaven. So they both fill the site itself. Meteor ends up popping off a little bit. You got the pop flashes coming out from Lakia, speaking of popping off. And they are just going to hold the site while the rest of the team all comes in. Now, at the end of the day, Munchkin does get picked off over in Heaven, but it's enough aggro so that the duo who was in the site still stays alive all the way to the end. Just this baseline thought that I can't be up here alone. I need to fill the site with Meteor, even if it's only 2 people, because that way we can try to trade for each other. We can cover each other's angles. That's what I'm impressed about. Now, when we talk about the defensive side of Gen.G, sometimes the composition plays a big role in this as well. And this is something I'll talk about near the end when I speak about Meteor and the idea of why wouldn't Meteor sometimes play Chamber, because he was also a very good Chamber. And a big part of that, I think, comes down to the utility. So again, we know that Gen.G likes to kind of shift their weight, make sure that they're always going to have enough numbers to trade. So what something like the Cypher allows them to do, depending on the map, is if you have Cypher, you can put up the Cypher utility to help Munchkin now be the anchor as the Viper, and then Cypher can help on the other side. Again, it could go vice versa. Viper also has global utility, so that they can have something like the Toxic Screen to help the Cypher. This allows you to feel safer with something like a 1-4 setup, even on defense, because usually on defense, like a 1-4 setup, unless you've already put the operator in a really good position, it feels a little bit risky. But with this kind of setup, you're feeling pretty good, especially on something like the pistol round, where they're just not going to have enough util to try to break through all of your own setups too easily. Fast forward a couple rounds, we see another example of the individual players understanding what their own philosophy is, similar to what we saw of Lakia jumping down from that A Heaven position on split. Now we're going to keep our eyes on Meteor. He was over on A site along with Texture. Now Texture has been set up for showers control. You've got the spy cam on the tripwire to watch for a short, and you start to get a little bit of information around the utility, things like reloads, a little bit of contact, to note that there are members of DRX on the B main side. this is also an eco round, and this will eventually, things like these will eventually lead to some of those thrifties that we saw Gen.G get throughout the entire week. Now, Meteor is going to start shifting over, but look at what Meteor does when he's coming in to help for his teammates. We'll fast forward a little bit. All right, so the Dimensional Drift comes out, checks, okay, Munchkins and Hookah. You've got a little bit of the Molly delaying. Now, Util continuing to come down. We just saw the smoke coming in from Mako as well. DRX getting ready to enter the site. And now Blindside about to come out. Throws the flash in the tube, then it's the Dizzy. Now, look at Meteor's position during all of this. He gets ready, and the smoke comes down from Mako. Munchkin is already here. He's already jumped out of Hookah. You've still got KARON over an elbow, and you just have Lakia, who's poor old Lakia, stuck in tube alongside this Yoru that's zipping around another dimension. Meteor doesn't peek out. He knows that the execute hasn't happened yet. The Yoru's in here somewhere, but you don't know where. So chances are the Yoru's going to pop out with a flash. You also don't know if the Yoru might come in to the smoke. So you're just going to wait. The Dizzy's going to come out, and he still waits for that as well. And as the Dizzy wears off, Meteor peeks out of the smoke instantly. He hears the Dimensional Drift exit. He hears the Dizzy wear off. He has basically outlasted all the util that DRX is going to throw to enter this site. And he comes in to help save the day. And at that point, they all peek out. KARON peeks out of elbow. Munchkin is ready for the crossfire from window. And this actually does lead to a thrifty in this round as well, because while Flashback has some amazing aim and movement, he will get the first kill. It's going to be Texture, who's going to kind of outsmart him here with a little bit of a blast pack bumping towards the wall, make sure that he has to show his elbow first again, and then it's going to be Texture picking up the kill. But again, things like that, just being wary of all these possibilities of the Yoru might come into the smoke, the flashes haven't quite gone through yet, so we're just going to wait to make sure I can come out and pick off that initial kill, and we're all going to basically kind of pinch into, right, and completely choke out the enemy as we encircle our own site. This is another round where Gen.G is going to have a shot at trying to flip the round on its head. Again, just one rifle. It's going to be KARON holding that Vandal. And there was a little bit of early util from Gen.G on the A side. They start to hear all of this, movement on C, and Paper X is just going to kind of push through, bulldoze through Meteor's setup on C. So now Paper X has taken over the entire site. Except for Mindfreak, who's watching for the potential flank. Paper X is going to set up these smokes, and they are ready to start planting. Now, during all of this, because of the nanoswarms and whatnot, Gen.G has bought enough time. Meteor bought enough time, and they made an early rotate over, kind of just decide to commit to it, where they already have 4 people ready to dive into the site. Now, while something gets the first kill, right as the haunt goes out, you see everyone start to dive in to the site, and it's just going to be Gen.G relentlessly pushing into the site to try to basically overwhelm their opponents, right? Spike plant's just not going to happen. Meteor gets 2. KARON gets 1 from long range. Now it's 3 members. They've now taken over the site kind of in their own way. Now Forsaken, really good shots, and Mindfreak does come in time. Eventually, especially Meteor not having a good weapon nor good health, Mindfreak will win out in this fight. But the idea being that once again, by just simply flooding the site and not all lining up as they enter, right? We saw Meteor kind of coming in from here, Munchkin delaying after throwing the snake bite, coming in from here. You had Lakia at this angle, Texture at this angle, KARON then at the back end angle. I mean, they're trying their best not to get, lined up and give free kills. No, sure, it could still happen. You could still get sprayed down through the smoke, things like that. But the idea, the philosophy is still the same, is that if we all enter at the exact same time from different angles and different lines, then we should be able to trade because we trust in our own aim, we trust in our ability to frag, and then we should be able to continue to force the enemy to go backwards. It's almost very Paper X-esque, actually. It's just a little bit slower. Like it starts a little bit slower. Paper X is the way they used to play that is that they would like non-stop. They would just never stop, right? They would decide they're going this way and they would just keep pushing through. Gen.G sometimes will, use util to buy enough time, things like that. But it's the same idea. It's this idea that if we get in and we have even numbers or more numbers, we're going to come out on top in the trades. Similar things happen near the end of the finals as well, right? Gen.G versus Retakes. This is the 4th map on buying. Gen.G up 11-4. And right away, you have a 2-3 setup. You've got a lot of tripwires and the spy cam to try to hold on to that. And meanwhile, B site is actually fairly empty for Gen.G standards, I would say. And you've just got the sky kind of looking to fish for info on B main. Now, what I believe Lakia is going to hear some of this movement, whether it's the decoy or whatever, because Forsaken's going to send a decoy towards B main. And that causes Munchkin to immediately throw a sneak bite onto Hookah. The guiding light goes out, checks in B main as well. All the sky smokes come out, and so Munchkin, just right away, now that he saw the paint shells come in and whatnot, throws the snake bite right under Hookah as well, throws up his own toxic screen. Now, with this sky smoke on Garden, Lakia's position becomes very important. He's hiding there in case there is another force, maybe looking for a cross angle, but they realize as the Dizzy comes out, okay, like this is going to be an execute. Because of the initial util and the trap wires and the spy cam from Gen.G, Gen.G feels comfortable rotating. So backup's almost here. It's halfway there, but not quite here yet. Look at Munchkin and Lakia's position. So the Dizzy comes out of Hookah. Lakia, right as the flashes once again wear off, is going to come back into the site to help buy time. Going to create a cross angle here. Munchkin does get spotted, but Lakia buys just enough time for backup to arrive in the back of sight. Texture's already in the site. He gets taken out, but Munchkin has stayed alive long enough to draw aggro to a different angle, which allows Meteor to go in to the site from the left side. That allows KARON to go into the site from the right side. Creates a 1v1, and at the end of the day, by this point, KARON has gotten so confident that he doesn't feel that pressure in this 1v1. He reads it correctly, reads that Forsaken would have gone all the way back around elbow, or at least the possibility of it, and he's going to win out that 1v1. But again, the idea that if you just stay alive for long enough, create aggro so that you can stay alive, that buys time for more people to come in. And at that point, they're going to be still concerned about different angles. You've got a crossfire. Even if you get taken out, you still got one more coming in here, one more coming in here. Things like that where it just feels like there's this endless supply of backup, of bodies that are still shooting back, where the aggressors also don't know, because you weren't already set up there, right? Your position wasn't a reaction to the util and the execute that's coming in from the attackers. It's just a matter of timing, and it just doesn't stop. And so a lot of their rounds end up like this, right? It's like 1v1s, 2v2s, things like that. It feels like it gets dicey, but it almost also feels like Gen.G intended for it to be this way. While these were just a handful of rounds, it should give you an idea of, again, what was Gen.G's game plan. It's to always basically flood and fill. Whether it's on the attack or defense, it's the idea that we will overwhelm our enemies by sheer number of trades, by sheer number of manpower and firepower. It's not about just setting up your star duelists, which they do a lot of. They do a lot of setting up for texture, but not in a way of texture, go kill, clear out the site, and then we'll enter. It's this idea of, hey, we'll set texture up for a good position initially, but we're all there to back him up. Now, looking back at the VODs, the reason I want to believe that this was always intended to be their game plan throughout this entire tournament is because they have this pattern where they, a lot of the rounds get a little dicey, and sometimes, they'll have to come back with the ecos and things like that. There's clutches coming out, which again, it helps when you have a 5-man roster like this. I mean, we've been talking a lot about texture. We've had some moments of KARON on Meteor as well, but like Munchkin and Lakia had their fair share of multi-kills and clutches as well. So that helps. But the fact of the matter is it's never this like, we just anti-strategy you super hard, especially it being kickoff, right? Like that's going to be pretty hard. So they just come in saying, well, we're going to eventually win out. And then you get to this point where they're always going to be somewhat close to closing out the map. Now, a lot of teams we've seen that are very good sometimes have trouble closing out maps or matches. Now, what Gen.G does throughout this tournament is as soon as they are close to winning, they'll just suddenly pull out something new. Oftentimes it's a big change of tempo, it's a lot more speed, but sometimes it's just an entirely different setup. So in this case, there was actually even a timeout from RRQ right before this. And now with a 2-1-2 setup, oftentimes they would actually push out far with like a 0 point or something like that. But this time, it's just going to be Meteor, who's actually just watching mid. Now what's interesting is before that, it would either be like a forward alarm bot and maybe a turret, or like an alarm bot and tube and a turret, like something else where you can kind of leave mid and just let it be. But in this round, after the RQ's timeout, Gen.G figures out, you know, something's a little fishy. They'll still have the operator and Lockya to support it over on A. You've still got, and then you have a little bit of support from Munchkin. Now, I want to believe that this was also, in case they needed it, they could kind of pit and Munchkin can watch for him safely if it came down to that. But it all breaks down a lot earlier than that. So the drone, they're kind of spotting for it. Now KARON does get a peek onto Flips on B, so they know the pit doesn't have to be used. You're going to get a little bit of contact on A. He's going to need to back out. And A is slowly backing up. And look at this angle that Meteor is holding. I mean, it's gross. Because Xfero actually goes on the far side. He checks for Boiler, and then he goes on the far side. And yet Meteor still gets the headshot sight line. He just knows that that's a line that you can take. That's an angle you can hold. And with that, the map is now kind of yours, right? You can rotate back and forth pretty freely on this map now. And eventually, we're going to see KARON buying a little bit of time with the snake bites, and it's going to be the no command. And in classic Gen.G fashion, they will just overwhelm their opponents. They even have the wingman to help start the defuse. That means everyone can fight. That allows Texture to be watching under 2 for a flank. And it's a pretty easy retake. But the fact of the matter is an entirely new position that he had just never taken this entire map. And that's the position you decide to take on the round, where you want to try to get to a point where you feel like you can close it out. It gets you map point. At the very least, you've guaranteed overtime. And Gen.G does this fairly often, if not pretty much every map. So here, it is map 3 of the same series against RQ in the opening match, and Gen.G is 11-4. If they win this round, they're going to be at match point. It looks like a 4-1 setup, but for some reason, Texture is just sitting on his own looking at mid. And why could that be? Because Gen.G is suddenly going to up the tempo all the way up to 11. It's a double blast pack towards Market. The Paranoia gets sent as well to set him up. He's actually going to find success here because he's going to find Elmimore kind of caught in his own little cyber cage. And then his teammates come to support him. So while he gets traded eventually, Meteor's there to help fill the smoke, make sure that they flood the site still. It's going to be the plant that goes down. And Munchkin's still watching the lurk as well. Now, funnily enough, I do believe they don't actually win this round, but the idea is the same. Oh yeah, this is the 2v4 that RQ wins. So again, there's some messiness when they're trying to kind of play for these post plants. They actually get caught a little bit behind this box, and Jemkin just powers through. So Gen.G doesn't get the round. But the idea is the same, right? It's, okay, we're close. This is where we kind of pull out a bit of a set play. So until this point, while they've had lineups and things like that, it always depended on the fact that, okay, whoever we have left, whoever's on this side, whoever's with the main force, we need to go in as a group. So what lineups do we have to allow us to go in as a group and make sure we set up for trades? But now, whenever they're kind of getting ready to try to close out the map or the match, they'll pull out these set plays or these, you know, hidden positions that they haven't shown where they can kind of close it out with a bit of a curveball. Now, this time it doesn't work, but they keep going and trying again. Saw it in the grand finals as well. First map Ascent against PaperX, 11-5. What does that mean? Next round gets a map point. What does that mean? It's going to be a 5-man stack B rush. Now, PaperX is fairly aware of this possibility, mostly because the null command is also online. So they don't want to have to deal with that. They don't want to risk it. So they are going to be set up for some sort of A control. You already have Mind Freak, who's kind of sitting outside of the site and doesn't want to risk it. But the fact of the matter is Gen.G, whether PaperX reason or not, they're looking for a way to get the advantage and make sure that they have the first step towards creating match point or map point. They're going to get into the site pretty freely off of the no command. Texture freezes. This is also a rare scenario of, again, a set play where you're kind of sending all the utility just for Texture. He's going to go in to try to clear things out, right? He's able to go up and above the snakebite. The snakebite's going to hold off Gen.G. And because they have the null command and because Texture already kind of clears up the site, they feel okay just saying, hey, let's just wait. Let's not take any chip damage. Let's make sure we get in, fill the site safely. When you plant it, you've got people all in the right positions. You even have your lockdown now. And the retake's a little tough for Paper X. Now, they're going to successfully destroy the lockdown, but at the cost of all their lives. Because Gen.G's post-plant positions are, I mean, it's as ideal as it can be. Double on main. You've got one on lane. You've got two people in sight. Texture popping off. It's the whole shebang, and Gen.G will get map point. Now, you want to know what's crazy? Is Gen.G actually has a bit of a spin-off on this in the very last potential map. It ends up being the last map. Sorry for spoilers, but if you're watching this, hopefully you know the results. Now, Gen.G is 2 points away from getting to match point. But at this point, they're already feeling fairly confident, and this is their bonus round. So the stars kind of align for Gen.G to create a bit of a bigger curveball against Paper X, who is already struggling, which is kind of unlike them. And here's what Gen.G is going to do. They're going to go for this 3-man push off of their own brimstone smoke. Right, the guiding light checks. Okay, people are there, so they say, okay, get ready. And 1, 2, 3, pop flash out. It's a triple peek, and then Munchkin peeks out of hookah as well to create more of a diversion. And Texture just cleans house. You still had an A setup for your Cypher as well. I mean, because here's the thing. If you lose that, okay, it was your bonus. You still got quite a few rounds ahead of you or ahead of your opponents. You're feeling okay. But normally you really upped the tempo when it's map point. So now you're doing it because you have the opportunity to, off of this bonus round, 1 round earlier, try to catch your opponents off guard. Voila. Works out very well. Now, we've established the general philosophy of Gen.G, right? It's about staying grouped up. It's about being ready for trades. It's about these 1-4 lurks. It's about flooding the site on retakes, things like that. And I actually forgot to talk about this round, so I'm going to have it playing in the background here. But Texture gets taken out early. And now Meteor does land some incredible shots with the Sheriff. Gets a double. But what impresses me more than Meteor's shots here is what happens afterwards. If you look at the mini-map, it's going to be Gen.G moving as a trio to regroup to where Meteor was. So he's going to leave in case there was a chase. He's going to go all the way back to B site. He's going to start to enforce it a bit more with the utility. And the rest of his team has come to double check if there's anyone watching for that potential weapon. They're going to look to recover that together. And then they're going to all group up as 4, right? You always leave just like one person out for information. The rest are staying grouped up for weapon recovery. And then you're going to regroup on this retake. All right, so while KARON gets taken out, it's now a triple with 3 rifles. That's what's crazy to me, is that these guys understand that RQ's probably not going to want to give those up, so they might be chasing Meteor. They might be watching out for those weapons. But guess what? If we have the numbers advantage, why not upgrade our weapons and fight on fair grounds? The fact that they go around this entire part of mid to pick up 3 upgrades and then go for the retake is absolutely incredible. I mean, this is just, it's ingrained in their brain that they should always have someone covering each other's back. So now with all that said, again, we've established the basic philosophy of Gen.G. Let's add the individual flares to this, right? So earlier we talked about Texture. Obviously, he deserves all the praise in the world right now. By far the most explosive, kind of most consistent duelist that we saw throughout the tournament. Granted, also because he played the most rounds, simply. I think he had the most chances to prove that. But on top of that, the calling was pretty good too. There's several rounds that I'm not going to include in this video where it's either like, who knows who called it, but it seems like it's either Meteor or it's Munchkin kind of remembering what the opponents were doing, and they adjust their rounds moving forward based on the enemy's movement, based on the enemy's placement, based on the enemy's utility. And now this, I thought this was an incredible call. So this is round 23 after a timeout from RQ. This is on the decider match, looking to go in to play-ins. right? And you're going to have, it's 11-11, tied 11-11 on Icebox. They played against each other on this map before. And what Gen.G is going to do here is Munchkin makes this call to really set themselves up for the type of defense and retake that they like. So initially, it's just a little bit of util, to just, disrupt the plant. You've got util watching mid. You've got the setup that you usually do with a 0 point to push out and plant texture far forward. But right off the bat, Munchkin's going to put down a snake bite all the way deep on B long, right past green. He's even going to take out the recon. And during all of that, because that buys so much time, it draws out the early drone because they want to check if there's anyone planted early, right? If anyone's watching for a little bit of a pick on B. And they had to wait for the snake bite. They're kind of concerned that it might be a push out of green. With their 0 point, they catch nobody over on the side of A. So Texture is free to sit on conveyor all alone. And immediately, Gen.G just calls for this rotate. Right? Texture hasn't cleared out everything. They don't know if there's a turret set up on mid or anything like that, but they just say rotate. Texture's there, 0 point, caught no one. Texture's on his own. We trust him now. Now it's our turn to defend B site. And RQ has no idea. I mean, how would they? They already committed to the 5 stack. Texture, he's going to get a little bit more curious. And he's just going to say, okay, I'll just make sure I'll hold to see if there's a rotate. Because they've got Alarm Bot turret watching mid. You've got KARON watching under tube. And now the rest of the entire team of Gen.G is here. And they are staying hidden away from the potential util, right? They don't want to get flashed by the Dizzy. They don't want to get hit by the recon that might be coming up. They're just making sure that they're hidden. The 0 point delays them a little bit. Their own Dizzy is going to catch sight of a few members. Meteor is going to peek out and get a double. And RQ's like, how in the world did they stack this? Texture was already on the flank as well. But it's just an incredible call. But you know what's even crazier? Is we skip forward. And, I mean, again, similar to how they try to get to match point, on match point, Gen.G is going to create a trap play. They've emptied A site. They send the 0 point. The ops watching. You've got, I mean, they are doing everything to sell Lakia's position so hard. The Thrash gets drawn out. Munchkin's watching for it. Texture catches one, and Lakia just swings out and gets a double. His own Dizzy goes through, and it catches everybody. And it's just an instant clear. The calls that Munchkin has, like this, were just impressive. I mean, knowing just when to really, I guess, pick apart the opponent. Here's another round where Munchkin has an incredible call, and he kind of takes it into his own hands to make this call and get the information for this call. So there's some contact initially on A main. Paperx just going to hold off on it. They've got a 1-1-3 setup. They're watching for A short as well. They've got that toxic screen to help kind of cover both, B main, mid, actually even a little bit of the entrance into tree. And Paperx is going to slowly kind of back out, right? The initial contact, they're just going to back away from it. And then they're going to hold and delay by putting up the smoke onto A main. With that, the wingman gets sent, as we can see on the minimap. So something can push out a little bit, see if there's anyone that crept into mid past the toxic screen, or right up to the toxic screen rather, and none of that happens. Clock is ticking down at 50 seconds. You still see nothing from Mindfreak's point of view. He's still able to check B main on his own. And something, he's just looking to see if it's okay, if it's a rotate back to A through A short. Not really sensing it, but now that it's at 30 seconds and his teammates have backed up, we're going to slowly pull back. You saw that 0 point in mid. You're thinking, okay, maybe it's a mid to B. So the rotate happens from Paperx. And right away, the execute happens onto short. And Munchkin hears the footsteps of Forsaken and says, this is our chance. We have just enough time to rotate to B. Digs deep into the spawn. And they're going to be able to get into B site for free. And Mindfreak, not quite sure what to do here. He doesn't know if he wants to go in and fight 1v3. Meanwhile, Munchkin has an incredible shot earlier on the flying members of Paperx. But it's the fact that Munchkin's kind of putting himself on the line, and he creates this move that either could be a fake or it could be a rotate, right? And he's fishing for the reaction from the opponents, and they do everything to really sell it. And they go for the execute here as well. And if Munchkin doesn't hear the rotate, or he just hears no movement, maybe they just go into A. But they hear people pulling off of B, so immediately you just say ditch it, because Munchkin is here in mid, past market, to pick off at anyone going either way, really. If they figure out it's a fake, then maybe they're rotating back to B, and Munchkin should, in theory, still get those kills. Here's another round where we can kind of see the thought that's getting put behind Gen.G setups as well. Now, this is probably a mix of the coaching staff and the players in the IGL Munchkin as well, but it's just this understanding of enemy team comps. So the idea is that PaperX brought a single controller. It's just a brimstone. So if you have to use your smokes to get in, you're not going to have any smokes to delay the retake. So the post plant gets a lot harder. Now, sure, you've got mollies and the gecko and the brimstone, things like that, to try to delay and buy time in the post plant. But again, you're either going to have to fill the site, or just rely on your post-plant utility that it's going to be enough. So what Gen.G ends up doing here is, and they do this a couple of times throughout this half, which doesn't last too long, is the fact that A site is going to be so hard for PaperX to get in without using all their smokes, right? Because you want to cover heaven, you want to make sure you cover in between the boxes, maybe you want to cover next to here, and that's all 3 sky smokes already, which are brimstone smokes. So the assumption from Gen.G is that as long as we can kind of pressure them as they're trying to get into A, they're going to have to use all their smokes, and then the retake should be easy. So they stack to make sure that if there is, this chain utility, maybe chain flashes, things like that coming up from PaperX, they've got members to trade. And then they throw down their own little smoke. They have their own toxic screen for the retake as well. That forces all the smokes to come out. You can see Mindfreak has 0 smokes. And then immediately they're going on the flank as well to make sure they disrupt any potential post-plant utility. And while the plant will eventually go down, Gen.G just has the absolute read that PaperX does not have a good post-plant situation. This is also really good against PaperX because they have no sentinels either, right? So again, you can always go for these fast flanks to pressure the post-plant. And then the retake from the main part, if you have your own toxic screen, is going to be pretty strong because they don't have any smokes either. We're almost near the end. We're almost near the grand finale, which is Meteor, spoiler alert. But before we get there, we should also give a shout out to the new guy, KARON. KARON had one heck of a performance at kickoff. And, in the beginning, we kind of talked as if he had a bit of a slow start or things like that. But no, I wouldn't really say so. If anything, I would just say he grew up to be a monster throughout this entire tournament. I mean, he seemed to gain so much confidence, and he was getting so many multi-kills. I mean, this guy just had an insane number of triple kills. He had 21 triple kills, overall 76 multi-kills, not that far behind Meteor. A little bit further behind Texture, but overall really pulling his weight. Had a couple really big clutches as well. I mean, there's this one where he's going up against Mako, and yeah, sure, you can argue that Mako is a little shaky there as well, but actually this is something that I think a lot of Gen.G members have been practicing, is that if they get flashed and they're looking to fight, this whole left-right movement, the jiggle that he does, you see Lakia doing that a couple times as well, that leads to some clutch moments. So things like this just really drilled on his mechanics. And as the tournament goes on, you see KARON making some incredible choices in terms of positioning, in terms of util, in terms of anchoring, understanding when he needs to fight to buy time versus when he needs to provide support. You can see him using the Omen ultimates to really flood the site a little bit faster, provide backup a little bit faster, sometimes not going into the heat of things, but making sure you can kind of peek out of smokes or have a delayed flood, things like that. And at the end of the day, all of this is enough for KARON to become the MVP for the finals of the kickoff, and I think he absolutely deserved it. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out because I do think, while I will argue that Meteor was the big reason Gen.G was able to win kickoff, KARON acts as a big linchpin, because if you only have 2 members that you can rely to frag out on their own if need be, I think that can get a little iffy. But if you have this third guy who's playing a controller, right, who's always kind of in the middle of things, in between both the first line of attack and the lurk, that's a huge boon to your team. But enough about all the other pieces, because here's the real deal. Yes, Texture was incredible. Yes, KARON had some incredible clutches and a great showing on his first VCT tournament. Yes, Munchkin had some good calls, and Lakia had some amazing clutch moments as well. But the fact of the matter is I believe this was all possible thanks to Meteor. Here's what I mean. You've got a guy who used to be a duelist, and you've got a guy who used to be known for things like the marshals, the operators, basically things where you're able to take these slow fights 1v1 or you're holding certain angles. Now he decides that he's going to yield the duelist position. I mean, I'm not going to say he decided on his own, but the team decides he's going to yield the duelist position to Texture. So not only is he allowing Texture to run free and fly high, he's now going onto the Sentinel role, where he is able to go for the slow lurks. And how amazingly valuable is it if you've got someone that goes on the lurk that you know that you can trust to win these 1v1s, right? To win these positions where they could open up the other side of the map and allow for you to rotate. At that point, the only thing you really need to do is have the correct timings. And whether it's just comms overall that's allowing them to do that, whether it's Meteor making his own decisions, no matter what it is, his timings are so good. Whenever the main force is starting to make some movement, he immediately fishes for more info. He takes a step forward. He listens for audio. He goes for a fight. He goes for a peek. He goes for util to hold them back. Things like that. If it's on the defense, he's got his util set up to buy enough time, and then he anchors. He chains his util into his own firefights enough so that his teammates get back in there. It's not just, hey, I'm going to use my util and buy time and then let's wait and go for a set play where I've already lost all my util. No, it's not that. It's util, then I will look to fight, take down one, if not two people, before my teammates are able to flood the site. And this all leads me to also believe that it's probably a good thing that they're not having him play Chamber. Because if you're having him play Chamber, he's going to want to need to go out and fight. He's going to want to have to pick fights on his own. And while Meteor is an amazing Chamber player, an amazing Scopes player, as we've seen during this tournament as well at kickoff, the point is that suddenly makes the entire philosophy of Gen.G's defaults so much riskier. Because what if Meteor does lose, right? Because he's not like unbeatable. So what if he does lose? What if he does go out on the Chamber and he does lose? Then this entire, like, we're gonna force stack on the other side, and we're gonna push out together and go for trades on the other side. That whole philosophy doesn't work the moment that Meteor is not able to hit that shot. But if you're chaining util, making sure you're weakening them, making sure that Meteor goes for these advantageous fights, especially on the defense, that allows him to be able to just buy time until the flood happens. If it's Chamber, even if you get a kill, the moment you rendezvous out, you will give the site over to your opponents. And sure, you could reflood the site, but you'll have like no information on how they entered, right? It'll just be empty. But maybe you still have a spy cam, or maybe Meteor was able to spot them on their entry, pick off a kill, or maybe he's just staying alive, things like that. Once again, on the attack, he's able to cover two lanes at once, right? He's able to cover oftentimes mid with a turret and the other side of the map with his own gun. And then he's able to push in, go for info, maybe go for the flank and mid, tie them up, and then he can regroup for the post plant. Things like that. Having this reliable member who's able to pick out his own fights and go for these impeccable timings is a massive boon. It's a massive boon to this team. And as I was going back and watching this, I couldn't help but think, no wonder that he was the lone remaining member of this team. No wonder they built around him to build the super team, or so they're trying to, aim towards here in Korea. Because sure, I mean, we've talked about, and then no wonder he's playing Sentinel as well, because we all knew he was a great player as a duelist. And then while he was a great Chamber, we were wondering like, oh, with Texture, how does that work out? Well, it works out perfectly, because Meteor is a bit of a slower player. He wasn't known to be that like Jet who's going in creating space with his rifles. He was always more known for his pinpoint accuracy, for his sharp shooting. And now he can do that to his heart's content on these lurks, on these anchors. And I just have to say, I think if Meteor wasn't there, this philosophy of Gen.G's would not be as reliable. And at that point, they might not have been able to utilize their firepower to win the entire tournament. So with the pieces they had, Gen.G was able to become the new champions of Pacific. Fantastic. The real question now is, will this work on an international stage? Because while Pacific overall has been very upgraded, and Gen.G, all the teams they faced, they had some very notable fraggers on every single opponent. But the international stage is always going to be different because it's the best of the best from around the world. It's always going to be a bit harder. The opponents are going to be a bit stronger. So is this reliance on trading going to be viable against international teams? I'm not so sure. And then the other question is, okay, well, let's assume that maybe it's not going to be enough. Well, is this a philosophy that Gen.G chose because they think it works best for them? Or was this rather a result of we're not going to have enough time or resources to anti-strat our opponents for every single new match that we have to play in kickoff? I could see that happening. I mean, they talked about it as well, right? That they've already shown so much, so they're kind of focusing on their own fundamentals, their own game. But then the question is, okay, so what if they go to Masters Madrid and they're thinking, all right, we had some more time. We're going to have all these elaborate set plays, and we're going to have this deep playbook. What if that throws them off now, right? What if? It could happen. I'm not so sure. I would love to know what you guys think in the comments down below. Let me know. How is Gen.G going to do? Are they going to have the same style at Masters Madrid, and how deep will they go in the tournament? And of course, while you're at it, if you haven't yet, I would love it if you were able to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Of course, if you enjoyed the content. But for now, the question is just going to have to remain until Masters Madrid kicks off on March 14th. We'll see you then.